Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
It's time for a fresh start to language learning. Pearson EdXL's new student-centred French, German and Spanish 2024 GCSEs cater to the needs of all learners, regardless of their background, ability or reason for studying. Rooted in learned language knowledge, their assessments are transparent and accessible, allowing all students to showcase their language skills. Through inclusive and relatable content, the new Pearson EdXL MFL GCSEs build a shared cultural capital that helps students develop an understanding of and appreciation for the wider world. Find out more at go.pearson.com/MFL GCSE 24.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio once again for the late show, and a really interesting topic tonight about teaching from start to finish, the job application process, the interview process, and basically getting a teaching job, and how potentially archaic or not, depending on your point of view, the whole system is. And this sort of show tonight was inspired by a tweet of mine about a week ago, maybe, where I sort of just said what I thought, really, and I gave a couple of examples. So we talked a little bit about the fact that a job application form has to be downloaded from each school website and then filled in, and then often it's still like a downloadable Word document. And you have to go on there, you download the Word document, you check it's the right format. I remember one I did maybe a year or two ago. It was still in like the Word 95 format. So I had to convert it to like Word 2000s because it was still, they hadn't touched it since 1995. You see what I'm saying? It was a Word 1995 teaching application form on the school website. And one of the things I tweeted like the other week was some of the questions on the forums are still things that probably break the law. Things like how old are you, or things like things about maternity covers and paternity leave and all this sort of stuff that probably like most companies outside of teaching, even in the public sector, even the NHS, even like other organizations in the public sector probably have cleaner and easier application processes than teaching. And then obviously tonight I want to also discuss like the internet. I was going to say the internet process. I mean the interview process, which again, when you consider now, particularly now post-COVID, the number of jobs where you can apply on one click, and then so imagine like LinkedIn, you apply in one click, and then following that the interview is like an hour. In teaching it's still a full day, sometimes 2 days, sometimes even 3 days, for more senior roles. Now yes, in some industries and areas this probably still happens, but when you consider that you've got like people who have just passed their first year of teaching, their ECTs, their PGC students, and it really is like an episode of The Apprentice, to get a job still in teaching. And when you imagine that teaching has unprecedented numbers of teachers leaving, and when you sort of see the stats of thousands of jobs still available, like only sort of a few weeks ago there was still like 4,000 or 5,000 jobs on TES. When you see that and then you match it up with the way in which the job hunting and getting process is in teaching, it's just worlds apart. It should be much easier, much more streamlined, in my opinion. But that's the whole point of tonight's show, really, to discuss the process, discuss different people's experiences of the process. I've got some wonderful guests joining me tonight. I've got Simone, who I'll say hello to in a minute. I've got Mikey, and I've got Lee, and I'll be talking to each of those three during the course of the next sort of 55 minutes, an hour. And of course, you potentially, if you want to call into this and actually have your say, and maybe you want to talk about your experiences of applying for jobs, maybe not even in education, but maybe you want to compare your experience of applying for a job outside of education to the experiences of teachers inside education trying to get a job. That's what we're going to be looking at tonight, is the experiences we've had, the changes that we think could be made at each step of the process to make it a bit better and a bit easier. Perhaps we can talk about our horror stories as well, and so on. I've had maybe 9, 10 jobs now in teaching, and in addition to that, I've had lots and lots of interview experiences, all of them very different. So I'll hopefully also share some of my experiences and insights in that sense as well. Just before we crack on with getting into the topic tonight, massive shout out to our sponsor on the show tonight. That's Pearson MFL. If you're interested in checking out their new suite of MFL qualifications, which are due out now, then you can go and visit go.pearson.com/MFL, and you can find out more about the qualifications in French, Spanish, and German that they have. And they've basically redesigned them so they're more student focused. And you can check them all out on the website. So I'll talk more about that later on in the show, but well worth checking out, even if you're not an MFL teacher, but you're just interested in the way in which qualifications are being built now. Simone, I'll say hi to you first. Are you there?
Hello, Tom.
Hello.
Thanks for asking me to come and speak
Well, it's
tonight.
absolutely wonderful because I followed you for a long time on social media. So I was really happy when you said, yeah, I'll come on and talk about that. Do you want to tell everybody a little bit about you, your background, what you're doing now, and so on?
Sure, I'm currently a 2IC in science at a really lovely school. It's a Catholic school, but non-selective, down in Kent. I've been a teacher for 15 years, and this is only my second school, and I've been there 8 years.
Wow. Okay. And how many years in total teaching up to now?
Well, 15 years in schools. I did do some lecturing at university a few years ago as well.
Well, did you see what I said the other week? That anyone who does more than 5 years should get a medal. So you should have 3 medals.
Yeah.
And in like 20 years' time, you should be able to take them on the Antiques Roadshow and have them valued at like £50,000 because hardly anybody's got 3.
I know.
So I should ask you, I mean, a lot of people have said, like fairly recently, that this was a really challenging year. And you've obviously been teaching 15 years. So how have you found this year and the last year or two?
I do think this has been one of the hardest. The only other year that I can think of that's been as challenging is when I was exclusively teaching from home, which I didn't enjoy at all. So when I was remote
Oh,
teaching
yeah.
because of COVID,
Why didn't
this
you
is the
enjoy it?
hardest year.
Yeah, this is the
Sorry?
hardest year. Well, first of
Yeah,
all, why
apart from
didn't you
COVID.
enjoy that?
Oh, I was not destined to be sitting on my own in a room talking at a computer screen and hoping that people were there. It's
Yeah.
not really my
But
style.
were there no perks to it? Because I'll be honest, when I did it, I enjoyed, like, I agree with you, like you miss a heck of a lot of the interaction and the whole source code of teaching sort of goes out the window a little bit. But I did enjoy the flexibility of it. I enjoyed, like, it did cut out a lot of like the sort of wasted time that you get in a school day, even the time like moving between classrooms, or like the stressy bits of like setting everything up, and like the noise between, like it cut out, for me, it cut out a lot of like the stressy bits. But I didn't get as much out of the teaching, of course.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, it did make me think that we have an awful lot of unnecessary meetings and an awful lot of extraneous admin in school.
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, it was just, and then when I went back from that into school, I really did notice. It was just an interesting contrast to see, and there were certain elements of it like I was like, oh, phew, like this is better because I can actually talk to humans. But then on the flip side, it was much more tiring. This is
Sure,
me talking now. It's much more tiring and much more, and there were many more stress points in the day.
sure.
But that's anyway. So yeah, so like I invited you onto this to talk specifically about, because you made a comment on my tweet the other week that was about teaching, like the archaic nature of teacher job applications and the process of getting a job. So I was wondering if you could sort of tell me what your thoughts are on this and how you think that it needs to change or should change.
Well, like you said, an awful lot of the application forms seem to be out of the dark ages. Often you can't copy and paste information into them. They're in different formats depending on different schools. And I just think it would be so much easier if there was a standardized form, maybe kept somewhere centrally, and you could literally tick a box to say, I'm looking for work, or tick a box to say, no, thank you, I'm not looking for work, and just have a standard application. And it makes it easier, I think, for the schools to compare candidates as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you managed to listen to this, but if you do, then that if you do get a chance, then do. But a couple of weeks, it probably was about a month ago now. I did a show on TTR with Wayne Cartmel from My New Term, and they obviously have designed this system where you sign up for the site, and essentially that's your profile, and then you basically could just apply for jobs with that one profile.
Oh,
So,
right.
but in the replies to that tweet I did last week, even though a few people did mention it, I genuinely think the government need to do something. We said about like the way they've done with the job uh, application thing they set up, where you can apply for jobs now on
Yeah,
gov.uk. There should really be something for teachers where they just fill in their thing on there and then they can apply using that profile on the government website. But I don't think that exists at this point. I think those jobs are just on there, and then you click through to the school website and then you apply through there.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I definitely think that would sort of change the game a little bit. In terms of this job that you've got now, I know you've been there for 8 years, I think you said, but what was your, like, talk me through what you had to do to get that job in the school you're in now.
Oh, it was cushy for me, this one.
Oh,
No, I'm going to completely throw all of our, theme for the night out of the window. It was sort of an accidental job.
oh,
Um,
really? Okay.
I was unhappy at my previous school, and I joined an agency, and I threw my hands in the air. I said, I would like, please, one of the nice grammar schools in the area. One of the issues at my previous school was appalling behaviour
Yeah,
that was very stressful to deal with. So I said to the agency, just put grammar school jobs my way, please. I'm not interested in anything else.
yeah,
And the rather lovely education consultant from the agency phoned me and
yeah,
said, now, don't tell me off.
yeah,
I'd like you to look at this school. It's not a grammar school, but just go and have a look.
yeah, yeah,
And I said, no, I'm not interested.
yeah,
I'm really not interested. I didn't want to go frying pan into fire. So she said, well, just phone the Hod and talk to her. She's lovely. So I did that, and that led on to an invitation to come and look at the school. And then it seemed very relaxed. It was, would you like to come and do an interview lesson for us? And it was, they didn't need anything else from me apart from the information that the agency had. And
yeah,
I kind of fell into it by accident because I wasn't intending to apply there.
yeah. I mean, like, obviously, I've sort of got jobs through an agency before, and in a way, that is easier, isn't it, for an
Yeah.
agency, because you do cut out, like, further down the line you are cutting out a lot of rigmarole. Probably, I guess you are potentially losing a bit of autonomy as well by doing that, though, I guess, but I don't
And
know.
also, not every school can afford to use the agencies. They often go on the
Yes.
local authority website
Yes.
and they rely on that.
Exactly. So, like you mentioned, like what? Because you were sort of like, no way am I doing this job in this
Yeah.
school. Like, what were the things like when you got there that convinced you? Oh yeah, these are good vibes. Like, I might do this. Like, was it just literally that they were friendly? I mean, it can't have just been that because there's loads of friendly people around.
Yeah, I mean, definitely from the moment I arrived, everybody smiled and said hello. It makes it sound like some creepy cult, but it really wasn't, honestly. Every member of staff I walked past went, hi, hi,
Yeah,
hi. And the children were fantastic and still are, to be honest with you. It's a great school.
yeah,
And they let me tour the school just with a couple of kids who were brutally honest about everything, about subjects they liked, the subjects they didn't like, and of course that was different. One child liked one thing, another child liked another, but they were really funny and really open, and nowhere was out of bounds. I was saying, can I go down that corridor and can we have a look at this and can we have a look at that? And I loved that it was so open, and I thought, do you know what? This is a really transparent place. I saw changeovers between lessons. I saw break time, and it wasn't, terrifying like it can be in some settings. And yeah, I just thought this is a really happy place.
that's yeah. Because it just like it reminds me a lot of the school I'm currently in, actually, because I started there in January and I'd just been from a school that was like proper tough, like probably
Mm,
similar vibes to what you're talking about. Like the school I'd just come from was proper tough, like proper. Probably like I'd rank it out of the 9 or 10 I've worked in. That's probably like the top two for toughness in terms of behaviour, I would say. Certainly, and then I walked into this place and I'm like, oh my goodness, like the staff was so nice, the kids are amazing. It's a school for the deaf, so it's a very unique environment anyway. But
yeah, yeah,
it was just a fantastic. You just get those vibes, and then it's just very easy from that point on to go, yeah, okay, I'll do this. Um, I guess, and I guess that's sort of part of the issue is how easy you can make it for someone to feel like transitioning into that job is easy, and it's like
yes,
I
definitely.
it's like okay, there's no sort of mental barrier of oh my god, I've like yeah, to do this job I've got to do XYZ. It's almost like right, this is so easy. I can just drift into this job and I can start doing it on my own terms and I can feel good about doing it. And I don't think there's that many around that are like that. I think there's some, but I don't think that's a widespread thing. If it was, I think the recruitment issues in teaching wouldn't be anywhere near what they
Yeah,
are.
yeah. The schools will be packed,
Yeah, this is what I
definitely.
mean. So I'll come back to you in a bit, Simone, because I've got more questions for you. But I'll bring in our other guest tonight. So Lee, do you want to say hi? You've got a guitar on your Twitter bio picture.
Yes, yeah, I'm assuming you can hear us.
Yeah.
I'm a semi-professional musician as well, which is why the guitar is there.
Yes. Lovely. Don't worry, I won't ask you for a song. Do you want to tell us your sort of like education slash teaching background role and
Yeah,
so on?
I mean, I've worked in education this year for this is about 20 years, 22 years, something like
Wow.
that this year. I started off in support roles. I was a learning mentor, and I've been sixth form support and deputy heads of sixth form pastoral support and all that sort of stuff. Went into teaching as an English teacher about 11 or 12 years ago, um, and had some jobs, bit of supply, bit of all sorts of stuff. And I've recently just landed an absolutely fantastic job at a very small college, um, which just deals with students with various sort of learning difficulties, disabilities, and that sort of stuff. And it's absolutely just wonderful. It's after years spent in comps and things, it's an absolute dream come true.
Brilliant. And I know you sort of made a comment, and I'm going to read your comment out that you made last week on this thing. So you said a big problem with getting a teaching job is the interview process. Like, where the hell did the idea of a whole day with student panels, tours of the school, micro teaching, etc come from.
Yeah.
Interviews in the real world are generally an hour tops. Why do schools think they need a day or half a day? Can you sort of expand there and give us some examples of why you've come to that point of view?
Well, I think, having done quite a number of these interviews over the last, few years, you do just get to a point when you think, what is this about? What is actually necessary? What is needed to employ somebody? No matter a teacher, you probably need a micro teach of some description, whatever that is. So you can see what they're like in the classroom and that sort of stuff. Fine. You need an interview as part of it. Fine. I fail to understand why when you get the email from the school, it often says things like, on the day of the interview, you will arrive at 8:30, where you will then have a meeting with the head teacher or the assistant head teacher who will outline the day, which nearly always involves a tour of the school, and then, a meeting with representatives of the student council, and then there might be your teacher take place at some point, and then there might be lunch, and then they might decide at lunchtime that they're going to.
That wasn't me. I think Mikey's just randomly clicking buttons. Mikey, shut up and let Lee speak, please.
And then they might, they might decide to shortlist at lunchtime and kick half of you out, which is fine because at least then you get half a day. Or, otherwise you're there till sometimes 4:30, waiting for an interview as you watch people come and go. And, it's a whole day. And this doesn't include, the time that you've had to spend before that, where they will say, we want a 15-minute lesson on whatever topic it is, which you'll deliver to this set of students. So you're then spending hours putting a lesson together with a lesson plan that, incredibly detailed in a way you wouldn't normally necessarily bother for something like that. And it just goes on and on and on. And you think, over the years I've done this, these interviews have just sort of expanded like an amorphous gas to fill in whatever space they feel the need to do. And I do seriously wonder if it's about finding the right candidate or if it's just about, well, at my old school we used to do this and then we did this and I've heard they do this at so and so. And it just fills and fills and fills out. I've been for jobs outside of education in the last few years. Things like the CQC and the civil service and citizens advice. They're not Mickey Mouse jobs. They're jobs with weight and responsibility. And invariably, they're just as highly qualified. You need just the same level of skills. And you go in and you might get a paper exercise and an interview, and they can decide if you're right for that job in an hour and a half tops.
So why do you think, why then? Why are teaching interview days like that? What are the reasons, in your opinion?
I've literally got no idea. I don't know where it started. I say, if you're going to boil it down to the very nub, the gist of what you want, you might want to see somebody in the classroom to see what they're like and get a feel for what they're like with the students or what they're like delivering their subject, whatever. And an interview is important. But so many times, these other things are all tagged onto it. And I've been for countless interviews with student councils, and you come out of that and you think, yeah, they're doing that to tick a box. They don't pay any attention, I'm sure, to whatever the student councils say. And then don't get me started on the turning up for the interview and in the staff room that morning, and you suddenly discover that at least one of the people that you're being interviewed with works in the school currently, and you think, oh well, we're all wasting our time here today because we know who's going to get this job.
And was it true? Were you?
Oh yeah, I've had that quite a few times. You've turned up and the person who's already on supply there, or is doing their teacher training there. For a fact they're going to get the job, and you're still there at 4 o'clock, jumping through the hoops.
Well, I want to ask Simone. I don't know if I can bring you in again on this because you said that in that job you went for at the school, you're really happy, and now there was sort of I wouldn't call it a student panel, but you went round with the students and you said they were brutally honest. You could ask them anything, etc. So. Yeah. I wondered whether you sort of what your views are on that, on what Lee was saying about student panels and that side of things. Do you think they are too often a tick box exercise, or do you think they're usually valuable?
I think they're a tick box, and I actually loathe a formal student panel. I'm sorry, but that's just me. In the past, I've worked in places, in my previous school in particular, where the students absolutely raved about, who was the most entertaining on the day. So the one who was cracking jokes and winking at them and being really pally, that doesn't necessarily translate into the best teacher. So, I don't like them. They make the scene crawl.
But do you think those teams, the leadership teams, sort of bought into that a bit? Like,
Oh
or
yeah,
yeah,
I think they take on board what the students say. I mean, I would probably, if a student panel, if I was in charge of a student panel and they said, "Oh, that teacher was really really funny and they did this and they
yeah,
did that," I probably wouldn't go for him. I'd probably go for the other candidate
yeah,
if they were
yeah,
too pally with the students, you know.
yeah, definitely, definitely. Because that's the thing. Like, in 30 minutes, what are those students going to be looking for, right? It's not
Yeah,
their fault. It's not their fault. They've been asked
no,
to
not at
do
all.
it. They've been asked to do a student panel. They go down there, but ultimately they're children, and they will be looking for completely different things than the leaders, what they
Yeah,
want,
definitely.
what the colleagues want. But then I guess once you've decided that that's going to happen, you've almost got to take what they say on board, haven't
Seriously.
you? You
Yeah,
do though,
absolutely.
because once you've said, right, we're going to dedicate half an hour to students interviewing. I mean, I've heard of jobs where the students have almost done the interviewing, like a little bit, like they've been part
No,
of the interview panel, they've been part of this, part of that. I think once you do that, you've sort of got to buy into what they say a bit. Not
well, you'd have to, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, Mikey's got his hand up. We're going to bring Mikey in. Mikey,
Good evening, Tom.
good evening. How are you?
Yeah, excellent, thank you. Yeah, I like to like everything that everybody on the panel said is exactly like how I feel. Having been in a situation where I've always had work, this year I've gone for 4 interviews, pulled
Yeah.
out one, and not got three. But and then the 2 years I returned to just a background story. I was working in central London, returned to Wales 2 years ago. I had 2 1-year contracts,
Yeah.
both in different schools. So I've had 6 interviews in the last 2 years.
Blooming heck.
So but all different, all
So tell
complete.
us about them then. Talk us through, talk us through the different interviewing situations you've been in. Anything interesting, anything different, anything that sort of you get frustrated by.
But just for context, then, so as most people know, Wales is a local authority. So it's got to the point now that I've got like 5 or 6 different local authority application forms, and I just cut and paste over because it was taking so much time. But it was annoying one time that the admin team in one school had turned their form into a PDF or typable PDF, which was exactly the same. So I had to go through and type it all out. So that's that. So it is extremely time consuming, especially for teachers who are on full time timetables. If you're on a PGC or an EC, you're doing your NQTU, you've got more time. Like if you're on a 6 lesson day and it's examination season, etc., you are maxed out. So putting in the application process is time consuming.
Yeah.
So there's that. So coming back to so one here we go. So this is one day that I've been through. So arrive as Lee said, arrive this time, blah blah blah. So we're all sat in reception, 3 or 4 of us, blah blah blah, all looking at each other. Hello, hello, awkward small talk.
Yeah.
Then they took us into the panel room, boardroom, and explained who was who. And then I was just like, I'm so and so, I'm so and so, I'm so and so. There were 4 governors. And
Yeah.
I was just like, right, okay. So we got 2 science teachers here. We've got 4 governors. We've got 2 SLT. That's 8 people. I don't remember all these names. Right. So that's right. So the first part of the day was the actual teaching. So
Yeah.
we all taught at the same time, and they carouselled around. So one person observed my lesson for it was a 60-minute lesson, and
Yeah.
I had the head of science in for 20 minutes, then I had the two
Yeah.
IC in for 20 minutes. But the only person who was constant, I was observed by a governor. So the governor did the lesson observation. I don't know what training they'd had on it. I don't know what weight or gravitas their opinion thing. Then we had a subject specific interview where 4 governors sat in, and the two science staff asked me subject knowledge questions and a bit of curriculum questions, and they made notes. Then we went for the panel interview, the general teaching again with the head and was it 4 governors, the head, and 2 science staff, and they asked questions, and I got it. That was 2
Okay.
years ago. And it was just such a long day. But yeah, I've had ones where I've had similar, but on top of that process, I've had pupil panel, and again, I do wonder about the weight of pupil panel. What's the reasoning behind it? I can't. Who do they select for pupil panel? Why do they select these pupils for pupil panel? And what's the reasoning behind it? Then recently, I had one where we all arrived, and English were being interviewed on the same day as science. So there were 8 candidates, and we were all kept in like a little enclosure. Reminded me of COVID, actually. Like we were all
Yeah.
isolated away for the day. Go back to the room. Do this. Go back to the room. We just ended up all talking and chatting. The head then led the first part. Like a 10-minute get to know you, and then I had to teach, but I taught after the candidate. We both taught the same class.
Okay.
So the first candidate taught for half an hour, and then she was quickly ushered away. Then I had to go in and set up, and I had to teach for half an hour. But the setting up took 2 or 3 minutes. Blah blah. It was the same kids, poor students had 2 different topics from 2 different teachers. They must have been fried, and they were year 7. I just think there's no consistency in the process. It's long-winded for the sake of being long-winded and officious for the sake of it. I don't know whether it's to justify why someone got the role. But then I've also had, when I worked in England, I was the only candidate being interviewed for an academy chain whose name we won't mention, and did the lesson. 40 minutes. Head called it to a halt, and I was a little bit, oh my god, they're going to get
What?
me. Yeah, 40 minutes. You said that's enough, and I went downstairs. He said, right, let's talk contract. And just wanted to get it sorted. He said, I like what I've seen. We don't need to do the interview. I like what I've seen. Let's get it sorted.
Was that, did you find that a good thing though, or not?
I thought it was quicker. I actually, I've got that wrong. There was a 20-minute interview with the head of science and the head, just
Okay.
on the basics, safeguarding.
Yeah, this was after the lesson.
After the lesson,
Yeah.
bang. After they were happy with what they've seen, cut. We're happy with what we've seen. Not like keep dragging it on or whatever.
That's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I'll bring Lee back in on this because he sort of brought up the issue of. I mean, do you like that idea, Lee, of like the cutting? Because like, there's a part of me that sort of like I like that, but don't like it. Like, I like the idea of we don't need to go through a process, and it's the thing is, it's like, what can you find out from that? That lesson. So I do like that side of it, but then equally, if someone did that to me, I don't know how I'd feel, because I'd be like, especially if it was one of them where it's like, we need you to plan a lesson on X, and then they just be like, oh yeah, go on, we don't care anymore.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I don't know. That is a funny one. That I'm not sure how I would feel about that myself. I do. That is a bit odd, right? It's one you wonder, what the situation was behind the scenes. Where
have you got Lee, have you got any horror story ones?
Oh God, yes.
Like, tell me some horror stories. Tell me some go. And
I think the worst one that I ever had was for a short-lived school in Newcastle. That didn't last very long, and I went for an interview for the English position there, and it was a strange one. The rest of the people who'd been shortlisted were an odd mix of people who had not taught for a long time, some who'd just qualified, some who'd qualified and then been working in bars and had never taught and were coming in, and it was a very, and I was the only person who'd been like consistently teaching, and it was very odd. Um, and that was the thing, a tour of the school in a, all kept in a room, meet the senior leadership, the tour of the school, the student council, the micro teach, and as the morning went on, it just became more and more apparent that it was the most appallingly organised and awful place. To the point where the lessons were supposed to be, you're supposed to get a 15-minute micro teach, and some of them were running on and on and on. And there was one old guy there, and I think it got to about 45 minutes, and his lesson was still going on. But we could see the class from where we were, but they just let it roll. Nobody said, right, that's your 15 minutes, that's it,
Oh
time to finish.
no.
They just let it roll on and roll on, and you're sitting there thinking, if this is how you organise an interview, if you can't organise this successfully, what is it going to be like working here? And it got worse from there, to the point where they kept moving the times about, and they kept coming in and saying, "Oh, Lee would like to move you later on in the day. Can you go in after so and so?" As the interviews were taking place, and um, eventually they came in and asked me to do that for the third time, and I just said, "No, I'm sorry. I'm going to withdraw." "Oh, well, can we ask you why?" And they took us along to the office to speak to the head, and I told them exactly why. That the whole day had been so chaotic and so shambolic that I had no intention of working somewhere where, if you couldn't organise an interview, what was day-to-day life going to be like there? And so it wasn't for me. So that caused some raised eyebrows, and off I went. But it was just, I was getting more and more paranoid and horrified that they might actually give me the job and I'd end up stuck somewhere like that. That was definitely the worst one I had.
Yeah.
Um,
Mikey, I know you mentioned that you also withdrew from one. Could you tell us about that one?
Yeah, I just didn't think I was a right fit for the school. And when they told me what the job was, it wasn't what my skill set was. It was leading on physics and chem on the BTEC that they do there. And that's not what I want to do. And I specified that on my application. So I just said, look, I'm a big believer in too much change is bad for you. In I'd be moving to a different location or moving, and starting a new job, I would have needed to like be teaching my strengths in
Yeah.
that. Yeah, but so I withdrew. I didn't feel it. I've withdrawn before. I withdrew years and about 8, 9, well, a while back, because I thought the behaviour in the lesson was appalling, and again I thought the organisation of the day was shambolic. I couldn't find anybody to tell them I wanted to withdraw. There was nobody around. Again, we were all in a holding room,
Yeah.
and I found I couldn't find any teachers, so I just went to reception and told them, and then I had a phone call off the deputy head like 15 minutes later as I was in the car driving away. I'd already gone. He said, "Oh, why are you withdrawing?" I said, "Oh, I sort of thought it was really disruptive behaviour in the
Yeah.
lesson, and I thought it was poorly organised." And he said he took it on board. Like, I've had feedback as well for jobs I didn't get, and again, different topic. I've fed that back in on so I had feedback about why I didn't get the job recently, but I also said it was quite an intimidating day, and I said the number of, like, there was an interview panel of 6 is too many. There's like,
Yeah.
4 governors, 2
Yeah.
teachers. Why is there so many people there? Like, and I'm quite an outgoing, confident
Yeah.
bloke. I've coached a lot of sport, used to standing in front of people, used to like,
Yeah.
delivering to groups of like 50 plus men, and I found it intimidating. So
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to bring Daisy in a second. Just before I do, big shout out to Pearson, who are sponsoring the show. EdXL's new student-centered French, German, and Spanish 2024 GCSEs cater to the needs of all learners, regardless of their background, ability, or reason for studying. All the new qualifications are rooted in learned language knowledge. Their assessments are transparent, accessible, and they allow all students to showcase their language skills through inclusive and relatable content. If you're interested in finding out more about the new suite of qualifications from Pearson, you can visit them at go.pearson.com/MFL. Daisy, I'm going to bring you in now.
Hi,
Thanks for
Tom.
coming in. As always, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good, thank you.
I hope you've got something horrific to share.
I saw this and I was like, I've got a story. So when I it was years ago now, but I went for an application. I went for an interview, and there was like 4 of us there, and it was a local school, so like where I lived, and from what I'd heard, like it was a really nice school, and the micro teach was fine. It all went all really well until I got into the interview with the head, and the head was like, it was just a bit strange, like a bit overly interested in the fact that I was female. So like lots of questions about like, yeah. So lots of questions about like, how do you manage disruptive boys? How do you find being a science teacher as a woman? It's not very usual to have an A-level chemistry teacher that's a woman, which I just thought was bizarre. Like, he described me as a unicorn at one point because young female chemistry teachers are so hard to find. And then he was like, I've just got another question for you. And I was like, yeah, no problem. He was like, can you explain to me how a combi boiler works, please?
What?
And I went, sorry. And he was like, can you explain to me how a combi boiler works?
It's time for a fresh start to language learning. Pearson EdXL's new student-centred French, German and Spanish 2024 GCSEs cater to the needs of all learners, regardless of their background, ability or reason for studying. Rooted in learned language knowledge, their assessments are transparent and accessible, allowing all students to showcase their language skills. Through inclusive and relatable content, the new Pearson EdXL MFL GCSEs build a shared cultural capital that helps students develop an understanding of and appreciation for the wider world. Find out more at go.pearson.com/MFL GCSE 24.
What?
And I
don't know what to say. What is the implication that
And I just looked at him and I was like, no.
What's the implication there? Is that
I said, I was like, I have absolutely no idea how a combi boiler works. I'm also not sure why that's relevant. Like, and he was like, well, it's an interview technique where I ask a question that I know you don't know the answer to, and I just like to see how people cope with being disrupted.
Okay.
And I just stared at him. And he was like, and he was like, so no idea how it works then? And I was like, no. And he was like, okay, that's the end of the interview. And he had this like massive grin on his face. And I was like, okay. And I went, I'm actually gonna leave now. And he was like, what? And I was like, yeah, I don't want to work here. I was like, I'm just gonna go.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, it's interesting, isn't it, how a disruptive question can really show somebody's resilience. And I was like, yeah, or it can maybe just show that they're not willing to be tested like that. And I just left.
Do you know what? That is mad. Like, Simone, I don't know if you're listening to this, but
I am.
Do you know how a combi boiler works?
It was just as well I had my mic muted because I just sort of went Pah! when I heard that question. I couldn't believe it. What a weirdo!
It was as if he was like, obviously, like when he said, "Oh, I like to ask a really difficult question and sort of try and throw you off," but I think it was the combination of the fact that he'd been so driven about the fact that I was female.
Yeah.
And then asked me about a combi boiler. I should have said, have you asked the male applicants?
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. If that was there were sort of sexist undertones to the question, or whether it was just, I'm asking you a random question to discomfort you, or if there were more sort of like sexist undertones to it as well.
It was so bizarre. I literally just left. And then when I went to the interview of the place that I worked at then for the next 5.5 years, I remember telling her about it at my head, and even she was horrified. Like, even she was like, why would you do what? Like, it's such an uncomfortable experience anyway. Why would you make it any weirder? Like, But I wanted to add as well that I teach internationally now, obviously, and this year I've been interviewing for science teachers, and it's such a different experience internationally, because essentially you have 2 interviews. They're about half an hour each. The first one's with the head of school, so the head of senior, and that's just more like a personality interview, just seeing how you are, like, especially with Saudi Arabia, it's just checking that they understand the connotations of applying for somewhere in Saudi and things like that.
Yeah.
And then the second one is with me and my line manager. And that's where we sort of look at the CV. We ask questions about their teaching, and we ask questions about potentially if there's anything interesting in the CV, anything pedagogic, I don't know how you say it, pedagogic, and things like that. And we ask about, like, if I came into your class, what would I expect to see and stuff. And it is really interesting because people, like, we've had some really great interviews where people have been clearly much more relaxed, and so you get quite a good you can actually have a good chat with them about their teaching and about what they enjoy and things like that. But I have to say, on the flip side, I have worked this year with some people that would not have made it 10 minutes in a British interview. Like, it does unfortunately allow some
Yes.
interesting characters to
Well,
get.
having worked internationally myself,
Yeah.
and also been involved in interviewing people in one of those schools for different roles, actually, and being part of that process, it's interesting what we're saying about, like, the rigmarole and the archaic nature of the UK job application system, which in my opinion is mostly true. But on the flip side, you can't argue that it's overly rigorous. Like,
Yeah.
it's ridiculously
Yeah.
over the top in many cases. But then internationally, it's almost like you sometimes go the other way, where, well, number one, you can't often get them there physically,
Yeah.
and sometimes you can get someone who just has. It's like what Simone was saying earlier about having the gift of the gab and being entertaining and being funny, but actually that can come across okay on a Zoom call. And it's very difficult to see through bluster over sort of in that sort of situation. So therefore, the international circuit does become much more Wild Wild West. Like,
Yeah, definitely think
it's much more Wild Wild West, even qualifications wise.
yeah.
One of the schools I taught in internationally, I think that, and now obviously, I'd arrived into that school, and probably 80 to 90% weren't qualified teachers.
Yeah.
Even, and I don't just mean they've got teaching experience and then they've then got this job. No, I mean this was their first job and they're not qualified teachers.
Yeah.
So that is where you get that sort of different element to it.
Yeah, for sure. Like, so one of the things that, like, happened this year was there was this guy and he was interviewing for us, and I just got this really bad feeling, like, and I said to my line manager, I was like, he is somebody who talks a good game, but I really don't believe, I just don't believe him. Like, there's just something about it that isn't, I need to see him in a classroom. Like, I'd need to see him with students, because it's just so, it felt like too scripted. So it's like what you said, like, sometimes people, if there's not that face-to-face teaching session, or, like you say, a student panel, which, to be fair, I don't love student panels, because they often schools do pick certain students for that, and then it can be, it's very artificial. But without that, you are left to have to make, it's a serious professional judgment call, isn't it? It's you having to make that decision based off of a Zoom call. And like you say, people can just blag it. They really can. Like, and especially in the international world with references and things like that, it can just be a bit, you really are sort of, gambling on it,
Yeah.
essentially. But I absolutely agree. The current system we have in the UK, it's so archaic, it's so wild. In no other profession do you have to take a full day to, I get it for a head teacher role, even deputy heads designate, if you're applying for a safeguarding lead role, I get it that has to be really vigorous. But does it have, for a classroom teacher, is a full day really necessary? And also, just my final thing, why does it have to be like the Hunger Games? Why are we all sat in a room together? Why is it so tense and weird? Like, it really does feel like you've been dropped into the arena of the Hunger Games, and you've got to fight for your life in that room. Like, it's horrible.
Mikey, go on. You got your hand up.
Yeah, I was gonna say like that's completely my feelings too. I forgot what I was gonna say now, but yeah, Hunger Games, like we're all in the room.
Well, you've been through lots of episodes of the Hunger Games because you said you've been for 6 jobs or something. So
in the last sort of 2 years.
Yeah.
But yeah. Completely agree. Like I just don't understand why. Like, and look, working in different industries. Like I came into teaching as a mature student. Like it's just so different and a lot more relaxed. And I don't know why the profession doesn't take this on board. Like why aren't they seeking feedback? Why aren't they looking to why have we got so many job vacancies? What candidates think about it? Why aren't they interested? Why don't they talk to each other? I had a conversation with an acquaintance this week who works in the recruitment field, and apparently he met with 4 heads in Wales this week because their supply bill for one school was £500,000. Over the last sort of I don't know if it was a year or 18 months.
It doesn't surprise me though. It doesn't surprise me.
And apparently this is what was said. We're extremely disappointed with the caliber of candidate that we've had for the last role that we've advertised, and it was almost like a sort of entitlement, like you've got to come and find us, not the other way around. And that they're a school that's renowned for only advertising for 7 to 10 days because they're oversubscribed and highly academic, amazing exam results, behaviour is amazing there, that kind of thing. And they don't. But what they don't seem to realise, I think, the world is changing. They've got to go out and find candidates, not like sit there statically and the way it is at the moment, and we all come in like the Hunger Games. Why can't they go out to teacher training? Why can't they go out to a couple of local schools who have got and look at sort of prospective candidates? Why has it always got to be the other way around?
Lee, do you want to come in on that?
No, I was going to refer back just to saying, people saying that it's an archaic interview process, and I wonder how archaic it is. How far back does this process go where it's become this whole day thing? Because I would probably expect that this is actually quite recent and not something that goes back that far historically. I really get a feeling that this is something that's just sort of developed over the last few years.
Which bits?
Well, just this whole idea of the whole day thing and all the bits that get tagged onto it along the way. How long historically has this gone on for in terms of teacher interviews?
I was experiencing that in 2007-8. I mean, that sort of thing. I mean, my interviews then during my training year were, I mean, I only had 2, I think. So, but they were of a similar sort of vibe. I had a couple in 2012-13 that were a similar vibe. So I think it's been that way for a while. Simone, you when did you qualify? Like 15 years ago or something?
Yeah, 2008 it was for me as well.
Because I don't know whether for you then it was the same. I mean, it's pretty much been the same.
I was really jammy. I
Again?
did play. Yeah, I know. I should buy a lottery ticket. I'm obviously very lucky.
Oh God, what's your jammy experience then?
My first head teacher, I was there on one of my placements, placement in an alternative setting as part of my teacher training. And this lady, she was tiny, she was formidable. The seas parted, the children parted, the staff parted in the corridor when she came gliding along. Very, very intimidating lady in a lot of ways. Well, I saw her peeping through the window at me doing one of my lessons.
Yeah.
And then she disappeared on one of her circuits round the school. And then she came back later in the day and she was peering at me through the window again. And I broke out in a mild sweat because of her reputation. She was quite fearsome, not shouty, but intense,
Yeah.
And she took me for a walk after my lesson. I felt like a little Labrador, She said, "Walk with me."
Yeah.
So you didn't argue, so I walked with her. And she said, how would you react if I were to offer you a job? And I
Okay.
was a bit gobsmacked. I said, I'd snatch your hand off. And she said, oh, it'll happen then. I'll get my PA to do the paperwork for you.
Okay.
And I had a contract the next day.
Yeah.
So that was just really weird and really jammy.
Was that
Yeah,
during
very
your
strange.
like PGC
I was
year?
doing, do you remember the GTP, Graduate Teacher
Oh
Program?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was doing it that style. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, and I had a 2-week placement at her school, and she'd been having a nosy at me and decided that I was all right for the school. So I was very lucky.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really interesting. Because that sort of like school direct now, or the
I
GTP?
don't
Is
know
it still
if it
going?
works that way.
Is it
I'll be
finished?
honest with you, I don't know if it works quite the same way.
No, no, no. It might have finished now. GTP. Does it still exist?
Yeah, no, it doesn't exist anymore. It was
Okay.
great for somebody like me because I wasn't having to pay to train. They were paying me, not a huge amount, but they were paying me. And I did observations for a while, and then I did 1 lesson a week, then 2 lessons a week. I had 1 day a week in uni, and it fitted very well with my lifestyle. I had young children at the time,
Yeah.
and so that worked out well for me.
Well, to finish off, I want to go around everyone and I want you to tell me 2 or 3 things that you would change, alter, or edit about the current teacher job application process. So, 2 or 3 things that you would change, edit, or alter about the current job application process for teachers. So, any volunteers to start on this out of the 4 people? Oh, Daisy's going to start. Daisy, 2 or 3 things.
Yeah. So number one, I would make sure that the people interviewing are relevant people. Like not just like a random panel. Like I don't like, why is the 87-year-old governor sat in my interview? Like, do you know what I mean? Let's make sure they're relevant people who've got a relevant input.
Yeah.
And standard application form. If you are applying to a state-run school, there should be a single standard application form. It may vary across borders, so England, Scotland, Wales, but for the it should just be a standard form. And finally, all day is wild. If it really should be max a couple of hours, even if the interview processes take all day, each person should only have to be in there for a couple of hours, and then it should move on from there.
Brilliant. Perfect. Does anyone want to go next? 2 or 3 things you'd edit. Simone is going to go next.
Hi, yeah, I agree with everything that Daisy was saying. I also think that when they hold interviews, they should inform the candidates the same day. Don't drag it out. Don't
Yeah.
mess people about. And also, if a candidate has given you a whole day of their time, have the courtesy to give them some feedback as to why they were not suitable.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've seen that a lot actually online fairly recently. People saying, went for a job, didn't get it, and got literally nothing other than, in fact, some of them got nothing. They didn't even get an automated email. I mean, that's bad, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, I didn't get informed about an internal job that I applied for at my old school. I only knew I hadn't got it when I met the person who got the job. They came round with her to shake hands with us all and say hi.
yeah. Yeah, that's mad. That's just
That
mad,
is
in
mad,
my
yeah.
opinion. Right, Lee is next. Lee.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said so far. It needs to be truncated. It needs to be more focused. It needs to be more time effective for everybody involved, I think. Certainly, as Simone has just said about the letting people know if they've got the role or not. I've had experiences where I've waited 2, 3, 4 days, to find out whether or not I've been successful, and it's horrible. And the other thing, as you were just saying, is the feedback. The times when I have requested feedback or received feedback, it has 9 times out of 10, it has been very much lip service. Something that very much seems like there's not really much thought into it. It's something that's, well, we'll say they've given them some feedback. We'll tell them this, this, and this, and it's not really been meaningful at all. So that would need to be done. It does need to be. If you're going to get feedback, then it needs to be constructive and it needs to be meaningful. Is the other thing.
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. Mikey, I don't know whether you want to you are our final contributor on this.
Everything's really been said, hasn't it? Everybody says exactly whatever.
It's been a lot of good points.
Yeah, and I like to echo the feedback point. I've had some real wishy-washy feedback. I didn't get feedback for one job till 10 days later. It's just I'm not
But
swearing.
that's sort of, like, some people do have to hassle for feedback, and that's wrong. Like,
I'm really proud of myself that I haven't sworn tonight, and I almost did then. But the feedback was just absolutely garbage. Everything was amazing. Everything was amazing. Keep doing what you're doing. And then that's why I didn't get it. And they said, "Oh, I wasn't in on the final cut because I had to go." And
they should just be honest and say we couldn't differentiate between the candidates, so we had to pick one. I mean, that it's better to just be honest.
100%. There's nothing wrong with honesty, saying we couldn't differentiate between the candidates, and we went for the one who we thought would fit the culture or the character of the department best, because everybody has a role to play in the world, and if they've already got a 43-year-old Welsh guy who loves his rugby and is a biology specialist, it's not going to work, is it? And they just need to be more transparent and open. But if there is a flaw in your delivery, or if you are unknowledgeable in an area, they should be able to point you to how you can improve. This, there was an issue in the starter, or there was this, and this is the text, or this is the video, or whatever. This is the recommended way to go, so you can improve.
Spot on. Listen, that's it. I just want to say a massive thanks to Simone, Lee, and Mikey for coming on and sharing such valuable insights in the world of teaching job applications. If you're just joining us now, then if you want to listen back to this, it's available via Twitter Spaces, and to just click play on the recording. It'll be available there to listen to. It'll just sit on our Twitter page. And obviously a massive thanks to everyone who's been here all the way through. So Nat, a big thanks to you, because I know you've listened to everything. VAR, thanks very much, VAR, for listening. Paul's been in and out, so thank you, Paul, as well. And Will has been here pretty much all the way through. So massive thanks. And everyone who's dropped in and out, thanks to you too. We'll be back on TTR, I think, tomorrow. We've got shows tomorrow. Yes, we have. We have a show tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. So if you're interested, please come along to that over on Twitter Spaces as normal. That one is with John B. It'll be on at 7:30 tomorrow evening. So yeah, do tune in. It's been great to chat, and I will be back next Monday. Cheers, everyone.
Bye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.